I'm wrong. Okay, so we are starting our recording. So welcome to week 6. We are almost done with this blended semester, so I just want to check in, see where everyone is, and look ahead. What's that? No more paper. Well, one more paper, a reflection essay. So let's look ahead. So week 6, all we have this week is the week 6 quiz. You've got 2 chapters in the textbook, and then this is a really cool documentary. It's called Shouting Fire, Stories from the Edge of Free Speech. It's from an HBO show. I think you guys will really like it. So cool video this week, and 2 chapters of reading for your week 6 quiz. And that's all you have to do this week. I think it's an hour and a half.
Whoa. The average, what do you expect?
An hour and 14. But I think you guys are really, really going to like it. Students tend to really like this one. It really highlights like popular forms of free speech and really unpopular forms of free speech. And it gives you that kind of full perspective. I think you guys will like it. Then looking forward, so we've got all of this week and we've got all of week 7. Under week 7, we're going to finally do Brexit and Cuba-U.S. relations because Trump is now, from what I read, going to unroll Obama's Cuba policy, so that actually works out well that I moved that because we can, if more news comes out about that this week or next week, we can address that as well. And then you guys notice there's a course survey? If you could take that, that would be super. It might lock you out at some point. Oh, it does. Okay, yeah. So usually in like the full 15-week classes, you'll have a survey in week 5 that's optional, but then there's one at the end, and this is what the end one is for you guys. I think it's like 20 questions. But I want to stress that at UAT, they pore over that data. A lot of colleges kind of ignore what students have to say. They really they look at every single thing you have to say, and they really listen. So this is your opportunity. If you don't like something, or you do like something, or you have a suggestion, pitch it in this because they will read it.
The survey that's at the 5-week period is not optional.
Oh, it's not?
It's optional, but it does lock you out.
Oh, it does lock you out. So you have to go in. That changed on Canvas then, because when we were in e-college, it was optional. If that is a cool one though, because that's really just about your professor. So that gives UAT an opportunity if there's an issue with a professor early on in the semester that they can address that right away. But please take the survey. You're going to have to anyway. But good, you're anonymous too, by the way. I can't see, so if you're like, God, I hate Abby so much, this is your forum, guys. I won't know who said it, but really, I'd like to know what you think of the curriculum because this class I rewrite every year, and starting in the fall, it's a requirement for all incoming freshmen. So I do like to hear you guys' feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like, topics that you think would be worthwhile addressing, just anything like that would be valuable, so take that. Then we're going to have, I put week 7.5, that's when you're going to have your blended participation assignment, the nuggets are going to be due. The final project I have set due the 25th, but I'm actually going to move that to, this is the technical last day of class, the 28th. I'm going to move that due date to the 28th along to match the reflection essay, because what I'm going to do is we're not going to hold class on the 28th. What we're going to do is I'm going to be on campus and I'm going to be online. So you guys can use that opportunity, that class time, to either finish up your final project, finish up your reflection essay, and then I will be online. So if you're an online student and you need to contact me, any last minute questions you can, and then if you're a ground student, I'll be in the library. You can come find me if you have any last minute questions. Okay, so we'll do full classes this week and next week, and then next week or the week after, we'll just meet on the 26th, and that'll be the last day of class. The 28th will be the last day of the blended semester, and you can use that class period to work on any last minute stuff. Okay? Yes.
For the final, it's supposed to be meme and everything. Is it possible to do a little meme story for one of them? So
yes.
3 memes together? Okay.
Yeah. Just as long as you meet that 4 topics, right? And I do want to stress that you guys do need to make sure you're so on the final project milestone, I only asked for 1 source per meme, right, per topic. For the final, you're going to have to cite 2. And make sure that you're using the approved media sources list and not just using Breitbart or some weird, So when you look at the approved media sources, there's Al Jazeera, NPR, The Economist, Wall Street Journal. These are conservative sources. Times, The Guardian, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, Der Spiegel. That's a German paper. But if there's one on there that you think is a good source and you want me to consider it, just send me the link. And then if I think that's a good media outlet, I'll put that on the approved media sources. But make sure you're sticking within that realm of approved media sources. Let me approve anything that's outside of that. Okay. So that's for the final. And just reiterating, you're going to have four memes. You need to make sure all the text on your image is your own original writing. Again, you can use humor. You can't be unnecessarily inflammatory or blatantly vulgar. But as you know, in memes, sometimes a vulgarity makes a point, and we're all adults. So if you feel that's going to make your point, that's totally fine, just as long as it's not, irrelevant and blatant, Make sure you have your 300-word explanation for each meme. So you're going to have 1,200 words total. And your analysis needs to consider why this topic is important to address for the global community, who it impacts, and how the global issue impacts the global community. So why, who, and how. That's what you want to address in your write-up. So you might just want to do that in order. You might just want to say, my topic is, or this meme is about the Iraq War. This topic is important to address for the global community because it impacts all of the Middle East, United States, Western countries, and this how this global issue impacts the entire global community is because it is a military issue, or however you want to explain it. So that's what I want to see for you. So for you to get full credit for your write-ups, you want to make sure you include that, not just generically talking about the issue, but connecting it on why and how it's a global issue. That makes sense? Okay. Now, for that last week of class, I'm going to post an announcement today, and I'm going to leave it open for comments. So for that last week of class, I'm going to let you guys choose that last class, the 26th that we're going to hold. I'm going to do a little survey online. So if you guys, there's something in class, like I know Jason's relating to like net neutrality, cybersecurity. What's a topic you want to see that last day of class that you want to address? So I'm going to post that today, and then you guys can respond. And then if no one responds, I'll just choose myself. But just give me some feedback, what you think might be interesting to talk about that last day of class, kind of a grab bag type of thing, okay? And then make sure on your final, too, that you include your reference page bibliography. Okay, so just make sure you take one final look through the requirements before you submit the final project, okay? Because I will have to have a fast turnaround on grades, so when you guys submit it on the 28th, that'll be the due date. I think I only have like 2 or 3 days to submit final grades. So if you have any questions on it, it'd probably be good to address those maybe before the 28th, just so I can, do anything like that. And then if there's a day, like when I start opening up and grading on the 29th, just be available. So if I have to email you like, hey, I can't open your file, or there's an issue, you can get back to me pretty quickly. So be checking your emails in Canvas. Ivan.
If we change our mind on the topics that we want, do we have to inform you?
I would like you to inform me. Yeah, for sure. Just shoot me an email and just say, hey, I'm going to switch one of my topics. And you guys can all do that. If there's something we've talked about that's super interesting to you and you want to change, or you've seen something in the news that you think is interesting, you want to change, that's okay, right? And this is worth 200 points. Here's your rubrics. You can see how my breakdown is, okay? So I'm grading you more on that you're fulfilling the assignment, the critical depth of your memes and your write-ups, less on like organization and grammar, because I'm not the English teacher, so. All right. Any questions on what we've got coming up? Doing good? All right. So let's go ahead and take a poll. When was the Bill of Rights ratified? Because we're talking about free speech today. A little history lesson for you guys. So while you're answering this, I'll tell you what we're going to do today. So we're going to spend the first part of class kind of doing a history of free speech, specifically in the U.S., and maybe specifically some violations of free speech in American history. And then we're going to break, and then when we come back, we're going to look at free speech today. We're going to look at blasphemy. We're going to look at unpopular free speech, things like that, like the Westboro Baptist and things like that. Okay. So it'll be a fun class. We might even watch some George Carlin. We'll see. We have to see.
7 deadly words or something?
Well, there's that, or his one about rights, which is pretty funny too. Okay. And again, just to reiterate, this is not Red Stripe beer. This is coffee. So I'm not drinking at 10:40 in the morning. Although some days I want to. Some days I'm driven to it. All right, so it's 1790. So yeah. Okay, so let's look at, oh, did you get it, Virgil? Got it, right? All right, so let's look at today in history. This is actually a huge day in history. So, first thing in history today, in 1964, Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison in South Africa. He ends up getting out, though, in 1990, I believe it was. He just recently passed away, I think about 2 years ago. And then, and the big birthday today is Anne Frank was born today in 1929. So if she would have lived, she would have been 88 today, I believe. Math is hard. It's also George H.W. Bush's birthday today, although I forget the year he was born. A year ago today was that Pulse nightclub shooting in Florida. And then there's one more thing I forgot, and I shared it online. Let me see. I pulled it up. People that follow me on Facebook and Twitter, all I do is like post today's in history because that's all I do. I'm trying to educate everybody. That's my purpose in life. All right, what else am I missing? Well, it's not pulling up right now. Oh, Loving versus, you guys ever seen that movie Loving that came out a few months ago? It was about the Supreme Court case in 1967 that it was called Loving versus Virginia, and it's where the Supreme Court shot down any laws against interracial marriage. Because interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia in the 60s, and then there was a black woman and a white man that got married. They got arrested. What's that? Yeah, that came out a few months ago. And so today was the day in 1967 that the Supreme Court ruled that interracial marriage is legal, and no states can have statutes against it. So big day in history, guys. Tell your friends. Okay, what's trending? What do you guys want to talk about? We haven't seen you guys since Wednesday, so any big things in the news that we want to address? What do we think? Frank, what were we talking about earlier? Okay, yeah, so now we have the class in here, so Frank was listening to KTAR this morning. This is a month old, but did you guys hear like a month or two ago, the Trump administration's talking about banning laptops and electronics on specific flights? Well, from specific countries. And then this morning they were talking about that on KTAR as well, if you want to bring that up.
The gentleman, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he went in front of some committee and wants to increase it to another 71 other airports internationally.
Okay, so specific airports.
What's that?
So it's specific airports.
Yes.
Okay.
And now one of the ones they mentioned on the radio specifically was Athens, for example, and that they want to not allow laptops in the cabins because of the report that the Israelis gave to the United States about ISIS trying to create bombs out of batteries and laptops.
Okay.
And so there was a big discussion on the radio. I mean, and you know, if they're going to start banning laptops on the airlines, then you know, business people. You mentioned you're traveling. I know when I travel, I bring my laptop with me, and then you know, it's hard enough being in a little tube with 100 people.
I know.
Now imagine the little kid behind you that's not allowed to have his leapfrog.
I know, exactly.
Okay, you know.
Can we ban kids along with the laptops? What do we think about that? I'm okay with that. I would pay a little more to not have a kid on my flight.
Well, or Benadryl.
I'm with you, Frank.
Benadryl.
Yes, indeed.
Just slip it in their sippy cup and then put them all to sleep. Well, you know, it'll be interesting to see how this goes because, as David mentioned earlier, it is possible to make a bomb out of a laptop battery.
Oh, 100%.
It is. Okay, so that's a real risk then, right? That has to be considered. But then if you're a business person and you're on an international flight and you're going to use that 8 hours as your work day, what is that going to do to people that need that time, right? Is that going to affect the fares? Is that going to, like, how is that going to impact travelers? Maybe people will be like, well, I'm not going to travel anymore, but some people have to. So what do you do? So that's interesting to see how they move forward with this.
Well, I mean, if you're here in the United States, I mean, there's always the train.
Yeah.
There's always chartering a flight.
Oh yeah.
And you know, they're talking about that gentleman who's trying to build the bullet train from San Francisco to LA.
Yeah.
I mean, if that works, then why can't we go from LA to New York? I mean.
Well, that's been the talk a long time, is like making trains in the U.S. like European
Right.
style, you know, trains. Oh, I can't talk today. But again, it's like I think the size of the U.S. right is the issue. But that would be good if we could have that. I would be for that. I don't like flying to begin with.
I don't either.
And I don't like going to airports. I'm not an anxious person in general, but I have a lot of anxiety when I fly because I'm in a tube 30,000 feet above the air. I know rationally, like I have more of a chance dying on the car ride I get that rationally, but it's an irrational fear, right? Plus, if you're in a car accident, you have a chance. If you're in a plane crash, and then not only are you like gonna die, you know you're gonna die, and you're like in a tube with like 100 people all freaking out, knowing they're gonna die, as you careen towards the earth until you splat.
It's
painted a great picture
that
for me.
statistics is false
Is it?
because not a lot of people fly, so it's not conducive to more people drive than they do fly.
Well, definitely.
So of course it's going to be more
Right.
accidents.
Yes.
Because of that. So to say that flying is safer because less people do it.
Oh, you're freaking me out now, David, because I have to fly like 3 times next month. You're supposed to soothe me and tell me everything's gonna be okay. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, if it's gonna add another layer of this post 9/11 travel, like how shitty it is to travel now.
Well, you're talking about driving your car and being in the plane. The other difference is control.
Right.
When you're in the car, you have control.
Right. That's true. I
When
like
you're
that.
in the plane, you're hoping he's
Yeah.
not drunk.
Like all
or
coked
high
up
or
from last
something
night.
else. Yeah.
Like I hope my pilot didn't go on a bender last night,
Yep.
then wake up at like 6 in the morning and fly me
Or-
around.
Or you got to make sure the mechanic did his job. right?
Exactly.
You have no control.
You don't. Yeah, absolutely. Ivan, what do you
It
think?
also depends, like, if that statistic is worldwide, because, I mean, even though there's not a lot of people flying, there's still a lot of, airlines flying at the same time, and, like, each flight is over 100 passengers.
There was just a flight that went missing last week. I don't. Was it Malaysia again? No, there was. I'm dead serious. Let's see.
How can an airplane?
Oh, dude, it's been happening recently.
How can you misplace?
Oh,
an airplane?
Myanmar. Yeah, Burma. It was a military plane.
Oh,
Yeah.
They don't have a bunch of military in this.
Okay, so some other stuff going on. Did you see that? I just saw this when I opened up The Guardian. Oliver Stone apparently interviewed Putin. I know, right? Megyn Kelly. Maybe I'll get in there. Hey, what's up, Putin? I'm Russian. Like, I can connect with him on that, right? So that's starting on Showtime. Last night on Nat Geo, they had that Syrian Civil War and ISIS movie called, I forget the name of it, but it was by Sebastian Younger. Hell on Earth, yeah. I recorded on my DVR, but I just looked at Nat Geo this morning, and if you have a cable subscription, you can log in and watch it online, but I haven't seen it like just free streaming yet. It might be in like a week or two. We'll see.
You say cable subscription?
Yeah, like what's that,
I have no
right?
idea what that means.
Like you're speaking a different language, right? I know, right? I only have cable because I'm under contract for like another year with my fiber internet, and they're like, "Well, cable's part of your bundle." I'm like, "All right, I'll take it." The Republican that hit the reporter is sentenced to community service. Lovely for
he also
him.
got a $385 fine.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, Melania and Barron Trump are officially moving into the White House, so that's good.
Puerto Rico.
Yes, that's one of the things. Puerto Rico is really addressing this. It's always kind of been like a talk, but now they're really trying this idea of pushing it forward because one of the arguments is, people in Puerto Rico are American citizens, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you can travel to and from Puerto Rico without a passport and all that, but one of you guys know that they're having major financial issues in Puerto Rico, and a lot of people now, and I don't know enough about Puerto Rico and their dynamics to give an informed opinion about this, but from what I understand, a lot of people are pushing for statehood because while they're a territory, they don't necessarily get the same benefits that states get from the federal government, so I think that might be one of the pushes is maybe we'll get more federal funding if we are an actual state. So we'll see how, something to keep an eye on. What's that?
They'll be paying taxes too.
Yeah, and then they'll be paying taxes, so,
That's one of the issues that I've had Puerto Rican friends.
okay.
That's one of the reasons why they want the United States before Puerto Rico become a state.
That they do want them to be safe?
They didn't want to become a state because of paying taxes.
Oh, because they don't want to pay taxes. Well, but when you pay taxes, you get stuff in return. So, I mean,
No, that's what they was telling me.
yeah. But no, that makes sense.
That certainly throws off the Senate.
Oh.
Now there's, I mean, you
Well,
know,
now there'd
there's-
be 102 senators.
Yeah, well.
And then I don't know what they would get for House of Reps, though. It'd be based off their population.
Right, but the point is, we had a nice even
Mhm.
split down 50.
Yeah.
Now you're splitting 52.
Yeah.
What about the American flag? I think I would do it.
Oh, that's another good
Oh,
question.
yeah,
I hadn't
that's
thought
another
about
good
that.
one.
Yeah, like what they would do with their flag.
They'd have to put 51 stars on it.
Yeah, they would. They would have. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of things to think about on that.
Oh, my
There's
goodness.
already a couple designs for 51. For 51 stars.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
would it?
there's already a couple designs there.
Oh, there are.
Yeah. There's one for like 52 and 53 and going up a couple of numbers.
I'm all for it. Like, hey, if you want to be a state and you can go through the constitutional processes of becoming a state, welcome. Let's add them. The more the merrier, the way I see it, right? Okay, and so those are kind of your big news stories. The Guardian, Trump is being sued from Maryland and D.C. I don't know if you guys saw this. This just came out today over his private businesses. So we'll see how, pretty much because of like the emoluments clause in the Constitution. Yeah, so lots of good stuff going on, guys. Oh, why cyber war on ISIS has fallen short of U.S. hopes. That's interesting for you cyber people. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so it's already 10:52, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of some key points of free speech in American history, and some key Supreme Court cases that are cited when it comes to free speech. So the Bill of Rights was passed in 1790. Now, is the Bill of Rights part of the original Constitution? No. When the Constitution was written, it was just the Constitution. And the problem was, so it was written in the summer of 1787, and then it had to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states, which it does in 1788 by New Hampshire. It's going to be the 9th state. Now, one of the issues, though, that as they were ratifying the Constitution was a lot of the larger states said, well, we're really uncomfortable signing or ratifying this Constitution without a Bill of Rights. Because what does the Bill of Rights protect you from? It protects you from the government. So a lot of these states said, we'll ratify it if you promise that there will be a Bill of Rights that comes like immediately afterwards. And that they did, they ratified it, and then they created the Bill of Rights, and it was passed in 1790. Okay, so that's 1790. Who's president in 1790? Not quite, not yet. W. Washington, George Washington, right? Okay, Adams becomes president in 1796. In the election of 1796, he takes office in 1797. Okay, this is where we see our first assault against the freedom of speech. Within 8 years of a Bill of Rights, the United States government already is trampling on your free speech rights. So have you guys ever heard of the Alien and Sedition Acts in U.S. history? Okay, I'm going to explain it to you guys. That's what I'm here for. It's okay that your high school history teachers have failed you. Okay, so there's really two parts of the Alien and Sedition Acts. One was about aliens, not green aliens, but illegal immigrants, or just immigrants in general at this point. And it really comes back to American politics. So at this point in history, well, let me backtrack. When the Constitution was written, were there supposed to be political parties? No. And when Washington leaves office, he famously gives a speech where he warns against political parties, but it was too late by that point. There were factions already at the very beginning. So the early political parties are your Federalists, which would be John Adams, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, versus the Democratic Republicans, which has nothing to do with the Democrats or Republicans of today. These two political parties are long gone, under Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. So you have these two political parties. Now, when immigrants were coming into the United States in the 1790s, for the most part, they tended to gravitate towards the Democratic Republicans, which were more kind of the party of the people, where the Federalists were viewed as a little bit more elitist. And so under John Adams, who was a Federalist, the alien part of the Alien and Sedition Act made it harder to become a naturalized citizen. It went from 5 years to 14 years. And the idea was that we're going to make it more difficult for newly arrived immigrants to become citizens and then join this party that is our opposing party. Okay? So that's the alien part. The sedition part is really the big part that I want to get to when it comes to free speech. I'm going to put the text on the screen. Do not try to write it all down. Oh, we're going to come back to the First Amendment. Okay. I know, exactly. All right. So really what the sedition part of the Alien and Sedition Act said was that if you, where is it on there? If any person shall write, print, utter, or publish, or shall cause or procure to be written, printed, uttered, or published, or shall knowingly and willingly assist or aid in writing, printing, uttering, or publishing, that could be done in one sentence. Scandalous, any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States, or either House of the Congress of the United States, or the President of the United States, with intent to defame the said government, or either House of the said Congress, The idea was that you can't say or publish anything negative about the federal government. Okay.
SNL screwed them.
Totally screwed, right? Now, at this point, so under this law, backtrack again. I get all excited when I talk about this. Newspapers were obviously the main media at this point, right? And much like today, newspapers had a political agenda too. You were typically either a Democratic Republican or a Federalist editor. Under this law, John Adams jailed 18 Democratic Republican newspaper editors because they said things that he felt were malicious or scandalous or knowingly false. Okay, so false news, fake news has been going on. This is not a new thing in 2016. All right, so you're violating free speech, right? Absolutely. 100%. So it only takes 8 years. And this goes to really who John Adams is as a person. I've read a lot about John Adams as a historian. He's a brilliant politician. He was a great diplomat. A really, really wonderful, smart man. Not suited for the presidency. He was very thin-skinned. He had a very hard time with people that publicly or made any personal attacks against him, which is going to happen as president. I think it's just part of it. And it's an American pastime to make fun of the president. I guess is what we do. I make fun of every president. I don't care if I even agree with them. I make fun of them. So he's only a one-term president, and a lot has to do with this. And unfortunately, he was a really great statesman before. He was kind of a mediocre president. This kind of tarnished his reputation, right, because he is violating your freedom of speech. So as soon as Jefferson becomes president, and he wins the election in 1800 and becomes president in 1801, he repeals this and frees anyone that had been jailed under it. So this is really your first big moment in American history where the federal government is violating your freedom of speech, right? Because under freedom of speech, I should be able to write or say, I hate John Adams. John Adams is ugly. John Adams is a terrible president, right? I should be able to say that, even if people think he's not ugly and they think I'm wrong, right? It's still my freedom of speech as an American citizen to say what I want in those situations, right? So again, just coming back to the First Amendment, make sure that everyone is aware exactly what that says, right? You have 5 big freedoms in here. And one of the later amendments in the Bill of Rights also specifies that anything not specifically covered is covered. So like, for example, like your freedom of privacy, right? Even though it's not specifically said so in the First Amendment, there are other rights that you have, right, that fall under the First Amendment. Okay, so that's 1798. Okay, it's going to skip ahead to 1873 to this guy with his glorious mustache. You guys should really bring back this type of facial hair. What do you think? Can you do it?
There's people out there with them. I could.
I think you should. Look at that.
I can't rock that.
Oh, you could rock it.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right,
Yeah, you should do it. What do they call it? Like, but no, you got to get rid of the goatee.
Yeah, no, I gotta invert my face.
You do. It's got to be completely different. Maybe on second thought, maybe you shouldn't. No. Okay. So this is Comstock. So the Comstock Act of 1873 is passed. And what this act does is it grants the post office the authority to censor mail containing material that is obscene, lewd, or lascivious. I think I totally misspelled that or mispronounced it. Now, what do you think they're particularly focusing on?
Abortions.
And contraception particularly, right? Because abortions are happening at this time, right? But there's no like open clinics. But women are starting to open clinics for birth control and family planning, and that's really the idea, is they want to make sure that that information is not being spread to the general public, because women should have 6.14 children in a time when it can kill you. Okay, this is still on the books today, by the way. This is a current law in the United States, except it doesn't include contraception. Okay, but the federal government, like if I decide to send literature out to hundreds of people in the United States about abortion, they could actually use this law and say, you're not sending that. They could censor what I'm sending. I don't know if it's really ever been invoked in modern times, but this is this, do you guys think this is a violation of free speech? Yeah, because you're trying to give information about contraception, and obviously you are censoring that now because you guys don't agree with that. So.
It's gotta be like a blue book law or something like that.
Yeah, it's like one of those obscure laws that I think if someone really tried to nail another person on that, I think it'd probably get laughed out of court. And then they might be like, okay, let's overturn that law now because it's a waste of time. Okay, so that's 1873. And I actually skipped over the Civil War. So during the American Civil War, and habeas corpus, which is part of the Constitution that says, like, let's say I get arrested, right, for whatever I would get arrested for, which is probably a lot of things. I have the right to be put in front of a judge, told what I did wrong, all those rights. And during the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln suspended that. So he would just allow people to be arrested if he felt that they were enemy of the state or they were working against the Union cause. They could be put in jail without being brought in front of a judge. That's actually really like when you look back at like violations of free speech, a lot of times it's during times of war, because the federal government will say, well, we're in a war, we're in a conflict, and we have to censor some specific things, or we don't want people speaking out against the country during this time, etc. So that's a theme in American history, this idea of free speech violations during a time of war, or just other constitutional rights. Okay, in 1897, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and South Dakota were the first states to ban desecration of the U.S. flag in 1897. Okay, so you couldn't like spit on it, jump on it, like you had to, follow the codes of the flags and things like that. However, the Supreme Court overturned this in Texas versus Johnson. They found that this was unconstitutional in 1989. So this was on the books for almost 100 years, that in those states that you could not desecrate the U.S. flag. And then in 1989, that Supreme Court case overturned that and said, no, that's freedom of speech. What do you guys think of that one? That's one that always gets people riled up.
You don't like my flag? Get out.
But it's our flag too.
If you're not gonna respect my flag.
Well, it's everyone's flag though. That's the point.
Yeah, but
And I'm with you. I don't think you should. I don't think
Yeah.
you should desecrate
Who
it.
died
I'm
for
not
the
saying.
flag.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here, Frank.
I know you will. I know.
I'm just saying that the thing about free speech is a lot of times it's unpopular, right? So that's, as a free society, where it's important that we even protect pieces of shit that want to jump all over the United States flag, right? Like, we can look at them and say, I think you're a piece of shit for doing that.
Right.
But you can also say, well, I think you're a piece of shit. I recognize your right to be a piece of shit and,
Right.
and violate the flag. I mean, that's the idea, and that's where the Supreme Court came in 1989 saying classifying this as free speech. What do you think?
I agree with the whole devil's advocate.
Yeah.
thing. I see their side. I understand they have their right.
Right.
I don't want them.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But one thing I don't like is I don't like the argument of if you don't like it here, leave. Because we're all Americans because we were born here, right? For the most part, right? You maybe you came here as an immigrant, you naturalized. But the point is, in my opinion, is just because someone doesn't like something about their country doesn't mean that they have to leave, right? Like, you're
And it
still
doesn't mean
American.
they have to desecrate the flag either.
Well, I agree with you on
wanna
that.
Protest.
I totally
That's
agree.
fine.
There's much
There's
better
no
ways.
reason
I agree.
to burn the flag.
I agree with you. I am totally with you on that. The Supreme Court, though, who understands the Constitution better than all of us, disagreed with that. They said that it's still free speech. But part of my free speech then is to say, I think you suck.
Right.
You're a piece of shit for doing that. And that's how it works both ways, right? Is that we can, I mean, there are things that collectively, I think as a society, we all agree are awful. But we, as a free society, I might agree with something that I think is awful that I want protected as well, right? And so you have to also protect the unpopular part of free speech as well. What do you think, David?
I don't agree with it for the fact that it's a symbol
It's a symbol.
of us
Right.
leaving Britain.
Mm-hmm.
It's a symbol of what the United States is.
Mm-hmm.
And although I agree with them having their right to protest and stuff like that,
Right.
but some things you just can't.
Right. mean that in the future another Supreme Court might overturn that and say we don't recognize this as free speech any longer? Because times change, right? Because in 1897 this was considered not free speech. By 1989 it was considered free speech. So who's to say the pendulum won't shift back again? What do you think?
I was gonna say, it took 100 years for them to deem it unconstitutional.
Right.
So what events led up to making it?
You know, I don't know enough about. I mean, we could
Vietnam?
easily Google. Well, yeah, Vietnam in the 70s. Yeah, and I think I want to say that guy was a veteran. I don't know enough about the case personally, like what his beef was, what Johnson's beef was when it came to that. But a simple Google search, we could look that up and find out. But yeah, probably the unrest in the country is a good indicator, right? Okay, so that's 1989. Or that was 1897 and it was overturned in 1989. Okay, I want to go now back to World War I. So there's another Sedition Act passed in 1918. So during World War I, the U.S. So when you look at World War I, it starts in 1914 in Europe. We don't get involved until 1917. This act made it a crime to they love the word utter. Willfully utter, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, scurrilous. That's a good one. I'd like to bring that word back a little bit. Or abusive language about the form of the government of the United States, or to willfully urge, incite, or advocate any curtailment of the production of the things necessary or essential to the prosecution of the war. So that's where you have the war issue. Now, there is a guy named Eugene Debs. Have you guys ever heard about him in history? He's kind of the Bernie Sanders of the 19-teens, if you put it that way. He ran for president in 1920 on a socialist ticket, like a democratic socialist type of platform. And he was sent to prison under the Sedition Act because he spoke out against the draft. And in this, necessary or essential to the prosecution of the war, the government said, you're speaking out against the draft, you're speaking out against the war. So he was in prison in 1920 when he ran for president, and he still got over 1 million votes from his prison cell. So I know. So again, using, like, I guess you can see, like, when you try to look at this, you know, rationally, I can see where governments say, yes, this is a time of war. And there are certain things that, you know, in a time of war, we have to be hyper-vigilant about. But at the same time, if you're one of those people like Eugene Debs, that it is your constitutional right to say, I think this draft is bad, I think our involvement in this war is bad, and then you're going to go to jail for that. And he was in jail, they sentenced him to, I think they sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He didn't have to stay in that long. He was released early, but yeah, he was sentenced under this. And this is, I believe there's another act that was passed around the same time called the Espionage Act, which is what like Edward Snowden would be prosecuted under if he came back. Is that what Chelsea Manning was? Or was she under a military rule? Military. So there is still an Espionage Act today that kind of came in during this time period. So.
Where's this when Vietnam happened? Because it was really bad.
It was. That's a really good question. It had to have been off the books. Let's see. I just want to see if it. Oh, it was repealed 1920. Yeah. So it was a wartime act, you know, which and that should be then repealed once the war is over and, you know, and you go back. But yeah, like if that would have been in play during Vietnam, that's actually my specialty as a historian, the Vietnam War. I teach an entire course on it. You guys should take it. It's really a fascinating war.
You going away next semester?
I know. I'm doing the Civil War in the fall and American history in this class again. I'll be teaching this every semester. But I'll probably offer again in the spring. Anytime I can slip it in there, right? I do. Okay, so that's 1918 World War I. All right. Okay, in 1940, I don't know if I have a slide for this. Oh, yeah. You have the Alien Registration Act of 1940. This targeted individuals that advocated for the overthrow of the U.S. government or otherwise replacing the U.S. government, and also required that all adult non-citizens register with government agencies for monitoring.
Wow.
Yes. Okay, now look at this time, 1940. What do we think of that time period when we look at the historical context of this act?
Communism.
Well, actually, at that point, Nazism would have been bigger.
Well, yeah.
Because at that point, we kind of put away the commie stuff for a while because we had an ally with the Russians and the Soviets, so we were kind of like, all right, Uncle Joe during the war. And as soon as it was over, we hate you again. This had a lot more to to do, I think, with Nazism. And I would say the Japanese, but at that point it's 1940, and so they haven't attacked Pearl Harbor. But there is a lot of rising tension between the United States and Japan. We cut off access to their oil and other embargoes on them as well. So this was weakened again by the Supreme Court in 1957. There's some other Supreme Court cases that are tied to that as well. Okay. And there's another Supreme Court case called Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, 1941 to 1942, and it established something called the fighting words doctrine that defined that some laws restricting hateful or insulting language clearly intended to provoke a violent response does not necessarily violate the First Amendment. Okay, so I want to read you what they said. This is from the decision. So let me give you background. So Chaplinsky was a Jehovah's Witness who had told a New Hampshire town marshal who was attempting to prevent him from preaching that he was a goddamned racketeer, and a damned fascist, and was arrested. The court upheld the arrest and wrote in its decision, and I'm quoting, "There are certain well-defined and narrowly limited classes of speech, the prevention and punishment of which have never been thought to raise any constitutional problem. These include the lewd and obscene, the profane, the libelous, and the insulting or fighting words, those that by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace." That's the important part, breach of the peace. "It has been well observed that such utterances are no essential part of any exposition of ideas, and are of such slight social value as a step to truth, that any benefit that may be derived from them is clearly outweighed by the social interest in order and morality." So they're saying essentially here that even though, yeah, you have the right to say something, some words, fighting words, specifically are meant to breach the peace. And in that case, it's not protected by the First Amendment. So remember that next time a Jehovah's Witness comes to your door, I guess. I don't know. I have a Kingdom Hall right in my neighborhood. They come to my door a lot.
I scare the crap out of them. I scare them.
You scare them? Yeah. I just am like, I'm not interested in what you have to sell.
Open the door and scream. Is that
Yeah,
anything?
like,
Yeah.
what do you want? Because I got a big sign on my door that says,
Oh, yeah.
that says no soliciting, I'm broke.
Yeah.
I'm
broke. I already found Jesus.
Yeah,
I'm good.
And all this stuff. But mine says, if you're not selling Thin Mints.
Yeah, there you go. You can come to my door if you're a Girl Scout. Okay, now, here's a Vietnam War one. It's called Tinker versus Des Moines. And so in this specific case, these two kids were at I think it was in Indiana. No, Des Moines, Iowa. They were in Iowa, and they were wearing those armbands around their arms to school, as a high school, to protest the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. Now, in '69, this is a pretty big year for the Vietnam War. Troops had just peaked in 1968. Nixon had just won the election, and so it's kind of a change of the guard, and it was a very tense part of the war. So the students were punished for wearing those anti-war armbands, and they bring it up to the it gets all the way brought up to the Supreme Court. And a lot of these cases, you have to remember, getting to the Supreme Court is difficult, right? You can't just like call up the Supreme Court and be like, hey, can you take, like they review specific cases each year, and those are the only cases they're going to review, right? So it gets, usually it's brought up at a district court, and then a state court, or state and then district, and then it gets to the federal level. So they ruled that the schools violated these students' free speech, and that the free speech protection is extended to schools and universities, public schools and universities. Is that what you're gonna say?
Yes.
Now, if you're a private school, you can dictate, because they're paying to go there. They are not receiving federal dollars, so that's why private schools can be religious in nature. So if you want your child to go to a Catholic or have a Catholic education, you send them to a Catholic school instead of a public school, which is getting federal dollars, so they can't have a religious presence. So that the students won this specific case. I forget I don't think it was unanimous. I'd have to look up exactly what. Another Vietnam War, the Pentagon Papers. Have you guys heard of the Pentagon Papers? Oh, this is a really interesting time in American history. So that guy in the picture is not the main guy, kind of on the left with the more hair than the other guy. That's Daniel Ellsberg. Daniel Ellsberg was a defense contractor. He worked for the Rand Corporation during the war. He was actually a Marine. He'd been to Vietnam, and then when he started to work for the United States Department of Defense as a contractor, he started to turn against the war. and there was a secret study that had been published, and it was about American involvement in Vietnam from 45 to 67, right? And it pretty much said all of these things that proved that the government was lying to the U.S. public about the true intents of the Vietnam War, how the war was actually being fought, and how successful we were being in the war. So he leaks this to the press. He has access to this, and he starts photocopying, I think in 1969, on like an old school, it's 7,000 pages. So he'd take a little bit each day from work, he would go photocopy it, and then bring it back, and he leaks it to the Washington Post, and ended up being leaked to 17 different newspapers. Now, at this point, Nixon is president. This actually has ties to Watergate. Because if you know anything about Watergate, Nixon, he had a group called the Plumbers, which were the guys that broke into the Watergate. Oh, I'm staying at the Watergate when I'm in DC next month. I'm super excited. I need to break into something while I'm there. Maybe the mini bar. Okay, so I backtrack. So Nixon had this group called the Plumbers, which he used to fix leaks, right? And so they had broken into the Watergate Hotel in 1972. But he also used that group to break into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office and look up his records to see if there's anything that they could use against him to kind of smear him, which there wasn't. The records were gone. They weren't able to find it. But they did break in. Like, that's a huge crime, right? Because this goes up to the Supreme Court. They tried to convict Ellsberg with the Espionage Act. It goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually throws this out. And it upholds the freedom of the press when it comes to leaking of sensitive government documents, which is another fight that's kind of a big deal in the last several years, right? Is whistleblowers and this information that is being leaked to news organizations, and they're publishing it. Because the First Amendment, as of now, protects journalists under freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. And this is really a case that gets cited a lot because they tried to stop, not only did they try to convict Ellsberg under the Espionage Act, they tried, what part of the court was to make it, to block the newspapers from printing the Pentagon Papers, because there's so many of them that were printing them, and the Supreme Court ruled in the freedom of the press, ruled on the side of the press, and so this was a big deal during the Vietnam War. Daniel Ellsberg's actually still alive, too. He's pretty old now. I think he's like in his late 80s. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. I email him every year. I try to get him to talk to my class, but so far, no good. So if you're out there, Daniel Ellsberg, come talk to my class. I also try to get McCain to come to my class, too, but so far he's declined all 3 of my invitations. It might be because I call his office all the time to complain. And they see my number, and they're like, we're not coming to talk to her class. I do like McCain, though, but I do call him in Jeff Flake's office, like, weekly. They know me by now. Okay, now we have another case I want to bring up called the FCC versus Pacifica. And this was when the Supreme Court established an obscenity standard known as the Miller test. And that's where, you guys ever heard of George Carlin's 7 Dirty Words?
Oh, yeah.
Or 7 Things You Can't Say on TV? It kind of comes out of this, right? They're trying to say, because look at the time here, 1973, right? TV has really only been around for about 25 years as like a big thing. And really, at the end of the 50s and 60s is when it started to really become mainstream, like where everyone started to have a TV. And so there's this fight now over what can and can you not say on TV, right? Because it's not like we have TV today where you can just say, well, you can record something and watch it later, or, at this point you can't do that, right? TV's always live, everything is as it is. So you can understand that would be kind of a fight. It's kind of like now, it's kind of like, instead of talking about this on TV, it would be like, how do you censor, when cable TV came out in the 80s, right? Because cable TV can say whatever they want, right? Any restrictions on censorship on TV is only for network TV. Because when you get a cable subscription, you pay for that, right? Network TV is free. Well, I don't know if is it free anymore? Yeah, it's still free. You just have to get like a antenna or something, right? And so cable TV, though, for a long time did still not, like, you still never heard a lot of bad words on cable unless it was like HBO. Like, look at TV, like channels like TLC or Comedy Central, right? But did you guys ever see that South Park like 10 years ago where they said shit like 150 times? And they had like a little counter at the bottom? So they can do that. Yeah, cable TV can say whatever they want. Now, then the individual network on TV or on cable can say, well, we don't want to alienate our viewers, so we're going to not use these specific words. But that's their choice, and it's not from the FCC.
Do they get charged like network TV if they drop an F-bomb?
No.
They
cable, they can't, you can't regulate that because people are paying for that service. It's not a service that everyone gets in that case, right? Kind of like radio, right? Or network TV. When I say network TV, that's just really ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and that's it. PBS. Well, yeah.
PBS not this.
But they're not, PBS isn't going to be saying shit like that. They should, though, make it a lot more interesting. Okay, where am I at now? Okay, here, let's do the participation nugget now. Okay, because that was the end of my little history lecture. So this is your participation nugget. So according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, these are the 10 most censored countries when it comes to the press. And then after you knock this out, go ahead and take a break until 11. Let's say 11:35. Gives you a little more than 10 minutes. 11:35. We'll come back.
Where's
Oh, it's in I know, right? It's kind of a weird one. It's right by Yemen and Oman, Ethiopia. It's kind of in that Horn of Africa area. But you don't really hear about them a lot, do you?
I'm surprised North Korea isn't number one. 'Cause I know
Yeah.
how strict they are with that.
Yep. Okay, so I'll leave that up and I'm going to mute and then
You are
come back at
now muted.
11:35.
Let me help you out.
Oh, yes. Should I call them right now?
If you want.
I heard they've been getting a lot of calls lately about
And that is the right number.
It is, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have Jeff Flake and McCain in my phone.
Do you really?
Yeah. You should call your senators. It's important. Like, let them know what you think. I'm always polite. I'm never rude.
Yeah.
Because that's not how you get things done.
Right.
You know? So you just say, I'm a constituent. This is my view. And the people are always, and it's just the aides. They're not making decisions. They're just answering the phones. Like, if you're rude to them,
Yeah.
you're just an asshole.
Well, my mother and my brother were up in Vegas this weekend. And I went up to go see my mom because she lives in Florida. I don't
Okay.
see her that much.
Oh, yeah, you had a family reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And, well, my brother booked us at the Trump.
Oh,
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan.
no, I'm not. I wouldn't say it the Trump.
I know you wouldn't.
But that's okay. You can.
I already got, I got a ration of shit for my wife. When
It's,
I got
well,
home.
it's capitalism.
Well, yeah. Well, no, I got a ration of shit for my wife because I bought a shirt.
Oh, okay.
$65 for a golf shirt.
Jesus. Got ripped off there, Frank.
And I asked for my military discount. She goes, we haven't gotten permission to do that yet. So.
That's what you should be complaining
So I
about.
might have to call the
Yeah,
director
do
and-
it.
Hey, where's my military
Where's my-
discount?
That's awesome. You should. That would be hilarious.
Oh yeah, but the place was really nice.
Oh, I
Other
bet.
than the fact there's no casino there.
Oh, there's not. It's just a
Yeah,
hotel.
It's just a hotel. Yeah.
That's actually kind of nice.
Yeah.
I'm personally not a gambler. It's just
Well,
not my
a
thing.
friend of mine, and neither am I. And a friend of mine told me, my neighbor told me, he goes, the reason he couldn't get a gambling license is because supposedly he has ties to the mob. And I'm like, I have no idea.
I don't know anything about
I don't
that.
know either. So, but yeah. But I have another friend up there. She and I used to do security work around here in Arizona. She's actually working the World Series of Poker. She's dealing. She's making $37 an hour.
Oh, that's awesome.
And by the end of the tournament, she'll be making 55.
How long is the tournament?
Like 2 months.
Oh, yeah, good for her.
So she says I'll make anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 in 2 months.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she's so
Well, Vegas is actually like off the strip. It's a lot
Right.
like Phoenix.
Right.
And it's cheap.
yeah. Well, and she said she went up there. She had $1,000, and it took almost a week for her to get her gambling license. And but now she's dealing, and she said there's 600 tables, 10 people to a table.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I have actually looked at
600,
houses
6,000.
up there.
It's like, yeah, it's
Because when my stepdaughter graduates high school, we're talking about like being snowbirds, you know, and whatever in the future. But like having Vegas be home base, buy a cheapo house in Vegas. 'Cause, like the housing market is really cheap in
Yeah.
Vegas, but we already like the climate because we're used to Phoenix and we like it.
Right.
So and we like Vegas. But I don't gamble though. I go to Vegas to binge drink,
Right.
while my husband gambles.
Yeah.
And I just jump bar to bar.
my mom likes to walk through the casinos and look at all the different artwork, you know, and so that's the only reason she goes. you know, she likes to go through the shops and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't gamble either, although I do have my blackjack and carnival game dealing certificate.
You know, I played War once at MGM. They had a War table. You know that game when you were a kid?
Yeah.
I won $25.
Did you really?
Yeah. I was like, that's up my alley.
Yeah.
But I don't know the other games. Like, I don't know how. I mean, I get the premise playing blackjack and roulette, but I'm not good enough to, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
really win
But
any
like
money
I
off
said,
of that.
she's having a blast. So,
Good.
I'm like, good for you. So.
Good. Yeah, go grab something to drink. My stepdaughter is 15. She spends 3 weeks with her mom over the summer. And so she's with her mom right now in New York. She just texted me this picture. She's outside Trump Tower. Yeah, she said her mom yelled at her for that. But she's like, I don't care. It was funny. And then she was in front of the Fox News headquarters and she did the same thing. I just texted her. I'm like, I'm so proud.
How old is she?
15.
I like how during the debate, they were talking about how it's made of Chinese steel.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know Hillary brought that up a few times. It was funny.
I'm sure it is.
Because he's all like, oh, this beautiful tower. And then Hillary's like, which is made of Chinese steel or something like that.
Oh, man.
Is Donald Trump someone special?
Is he what?
Special.
Like mentally special? I can't say that.
He definitely walks like he is.
I mean, I don't know enough about that to say
I
that.
saw on the news this morning. I said, what's wrong with
However, I do feel like he hasn't read the Constitution.
He has a really high IQ though, surprisingly. Like higher than most presidents.
I highly doubt that.
I heard, that's what I heard.
Where was it? Who did this IQ test? Fox News?
you? Probably.
Be careful now. I'll be exercising my free speech.
Do it! Bring it, Frank! I always love in these classes when I get one semester I had no one with an opposing view, and it was boring. Like, I need opposing views in this class. I need people to talk about it. That's the whole point of global issues. It's like you're not learning global issues if everyone agrees with you. You know, like you have to like see someone else's view in a respectful way.
Right.
You know, I think it's great.
I certainly don't agree with everything he has to say, but.
Well, it's almost impossible to agree with everything,
Yeah.
right? That any president has to
Right.
say. My favorite president in U.S. history is Theodore Roosevelt. I love Teddy Roosevelt. But if you look back at him in modern eyes, he was a racist, right? He believed in eugenics, meaning you should like use science to like thin the herd.
Yeah.
You know, like get rid of people that have disabilities and like unsavory characteristics. But I think he was the smartest U.S. president. Like he was genius level. Like he wrote. Not only was he president twice, he ran for a third time under like a populist party. He was shot during his speech and finished his speech. He wrote 35 books. He was a naturalist. He was a conservative, like a conservationist. You know, he was just brilliant. And there's a lot of like when you read biographies about him, people that knew him said that when he was president, every second he wasn't doing something presidential, he was reading. So like, let's say I had a meeting with the president and then I left before the next person came in, he'd be reading. Like, why am I wasting 5 minutes waiting for someone? I'm going to read. He was really a smart man.
Who?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, there's a Rough Rider.
He was, yeah. Oh, he wanted to fight in World War I. And he was too old. And the military was like, no.
Didn't he have asthma? Like really severe asthma?
Well, actually, growing up as a young child, he was very asthmatic and like kind of like weak, right? And so he used physical fitness as a way to get over his weaknesses. And he became kind of like a big burly guy. But then when World War I came around, he would have been, well, he died in 1919, and he died in his 60s. So I mean, he was older, but he was like, I want to fight, and the military was like, just stay home, Teddy. But Teddy Roosevelt's son died in World War I. One of his sons, Quentin, I think was his name. One of his older sons died. And Teddy Roosevelt's mom and wife died on the same day, on Valentine's Day, in 1880 something.
The same day.
Same day.
Not separate days.
Nope, within hours of one another. So that's a big blow. And then so he had one daughter with that wife. Then he remarried another woman and had, I think, 4 or 5 more kids with her. They both died of like, I don't know, one of the illnesses that gets everyone in that time in history. He had a really high voice, too. Have you ever heard his voice? You have to listen to this. Yeah. He was one of the very first president to get his voice recorded, I think, was Benjamin Harrison. But by the time Theodore Roosevelt was president, he was
The
ready for
great
president. Right?
fundamental issue now before our people to be stated. It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. I have one.
That doesn't sound to me like what I thought. I thought he'd be all like, roar, roar, you know. But he ran, so he was a Republican, and then he ran, he became president because William McKinley was assassinated, and he was the vice president. And what's funny is, like, before that he was involved in New York state politics, and they made him vice president under McKinley because they thought that they would shut him up and keep him quiet, because the VP famously, like, doesn't do anything. So like, oh, we'll just make him vice president and we'll get him out of state politics and like he'll be marginalized. And then McKinley was assassinated and then he became president. And then he won his own term after that. And then he stepped down and then Taft was president. And then in 1912 he ran again, but he didn't run as a Republican. He ran as something called the Bull Moose Party or a Populist Party. And then he lost to Woodrow Wilson in that election. If you have Netflix, Ken Burns, what was it, Ken Burns? I don't know. PBS did a really good documentary a couple years ago called The Roosevelts, and it's about Theodore, Eleanor, and Franklin. It's like 6 hours or crazy long, but it's on Netflix now. I just saw it the other day. It's really good. And PBS has a Vietnam War special coming out in the fall. That's 10 hours. And it's by Ken Burns, which Ken Burns is like, as a historian, like in that, he's like super popular among historians. We love his documentaries because he spent 7 years on this Vietnam War documentary. He spent a lot of time, he gets a lot of input from historians, so his stuff is like, for educators, is amazing. I love his stuff. So that comes out in September, and it's like a 10-part Vietnam War documentary.
Might as well be a series.
It's going to be great. There have been a lot of documentaries about Vietnam, but I bet this one is going to be, and PBS just did one on World War I, too. There's 3 parts. It's streaming online right now. I'm a nerd. What can I say? All right. All right, so I'm going to unmute.
You are now unmuted.
I'm going to pass this out to you guys. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Just gotta hang on to it. Saving some time here. This is the best part, coming up with a free speech lecture, I think. History part's over. Okay, I put a paper there for you. Don't have to do anything with it yet. Just hang on to it. Okay, so welcome back to class. So we did a short kind of just brief history about some free speech violations in U.S. history. And now we're going to look kind of more current. So when you think about free speech laws, why do they even exist in the first place? Freedom, right? America, freedom. But not just in America, just all of world society. Why would free speech laws exist? Does it exist to protect popular ideas? No, because popular ideas are popular.
Just try to sustain, no stifle creativity.
Right, exactly. And so no stifling of creativity to protect unpopular decisions, because if you don't have free speech laws, if you have a minority of the population that has a view on something, you can easily stifle that, right? And that's kind of one of the things about American politics that a lot of people don't understand is that people always say, well, majority rules, right? Not really. We're not a true democracy in that sense. We're a republic, right? And a lot of our laws exist to protect minority thoughts and opinions and speech. So keep that in mind when you think about free speech, okay? Now, what about free speech laws worldwide? What do you guys think?
Oh, no.
Okay, so it depends a lot, right? And so when you look at, I forgot to put this chart up that I wanted to look at, but when you look at, let's kind of break the world up into pieces. When you look at like the U.S. and Western society versus, say, the Middle East versus, say, Asia versus Africa versus South America, it varies, right? Depending on where you are in the world, what you can and cannot say. So like, let's say I'm in the United States and I say, I hate Muslims. Then I go to the Middle East and I say, I hate Muslims. Am I protected?
No.
Of course not, right? So you have to recognize like where you are in the world really does dictate what you have to say depending on, no matter where you're from, right? No matter what rights you have from your home country, right? It depends on where you're at. And so I had this chart and I forgot to pull it up. Let me see if I can, let's see. That's not what I wanted. I want Freedom House, speech, there we go. Freedom of expression. That's not what I was looking at earlier. I guess we could do freedom of the press. That's kind of the same idea, freedom of the press, right? Freedom of speech. So when you look at this, the green countries have a free press, right? The yellow are partly free, and then not free. And so you can see, this varies wildly. And when you look at the Western world, what we would call pretty much Northern and Western Europe, and the United States, Canada, the UN essentially, right? Although there are a lot of these are UN states too, so keep that in mind as well. The UN has a lot of member states. But that kind of gives you an idea, right? Like here I can say whatever the hell I want, but let's say I go to Brazil, I might have to be a little bit careful about what I have to say, right? So it also is a good like rule of thumb though, if you are traveling, kind of maybe have a basic idea of the laws and the culture of where you're traveling so that you don't have those faux pas. But what I passed out to you guys, so go ahead and grab that handout, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the UN. And if you're online, you can find it here at this website, the UN.org, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then you can download the PDF, and that's what I printed out for you guys. So don't open it yet. I mean, you might have. But when you think about a universal UN Declaration of Human Rights, what types of things do you think the UN will say? I don't care what country you're from, these are universal human rights. What do you think? Think freedom of speech will be on there?
No, to an extent.
Actually it is. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Yeah, definitely. So take a second and kind of go through these. I'll pull up the PDF for online students, and we'll just kind of eyeball it. We're not going to analyze it, okay? But they have a preamble, right? So this idea that kind of an introduction to human rights, right? Member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the UN, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. So, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without discrimination based on your race, color, sex, language, religion, political opinion, national origin, property, etc. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. That sounds pretty familiar, right? No one shall be held in, what's that?
Except for the Middle East.
Right. No one should be held in slavery or servitude, except based off what we know about human trafficking. That's not being met, right? No torture. Recognition as a person before the law. All are equal before the law. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Everyone's entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing. Right? So a lot of these are, familiar to us as Americans, right? Article 11, again, has rights for the accused. Privacy, freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state, meaning country, not state as in the United States. The right to leave any country, asylum from persecution, the right to a nationality. Men and women of full age without any limitations have the right to marry and have a family. right to own property, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief and freedom. This is the big one, though. Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. And so according to the UN, right, everyone is supposed to have this freedom of expression, which is really free speech, right? To hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. But we know based off that map we just saw from Freedom House that UN member states aren't necessarily following all of these, or what they deem free speech might be different from what we deem free speech, right? So that's something to consider as well. Another thing I want to point about this is you can put, there's 30 articles altogether. I really just wanted to get to 19, so I'm going to stop there and you guys can read it on your own. It makes us feel all nice and fuzzy, right? We're going to write these human rights. Everyone gets these human rights. Yeah. But just because you have this 8-page PDF, do you think dictators around the world are going to be like, well, the UN said in Article 19, no. So while, yes, there's this idea that these are great things to have, and I think as Americans, as part of a Western culture, we get this, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that all countries recognize that, and so that's something that you always have to consider, especially if you are a world traveler, right? And you're going to these countries, you do have to be careful about what you say, because you probably have seen in the news before at some point where Americans will be in, did you guys hear about those hikers that were like crossed the border of Iran and they got detained? So, you can be in another country, and just because you're an American doesn't give you any guarantees on your safety or your rights, right?
Well,
So
those hikers were stupid.
they were stupid.
It was-
Come on, there's plenty of hiking in other countries of the world.
You think you're gonna go to Iran
I know.
and hike over the border?
Yeah,
Right.
that is not on my bucket list. Not on my bucket list for sure.
People that go to North Korea.
I know, exactly. Yeah, in those cases, you're probably not going to get much help. I get that if you want to, check off lists, and
They were warned, especially the one for North Korea, that the few that are being held in, they were warned well in advance.
Right.
Don't do this.
Oh, yeah.
But no,
Okay, now, what if a UN member state breaks this idea of free speech? Is there really any recourse? Not really. I mean,
Seemed like
you might get censured by the UN, or they might, publicly
what does
disagree.
that really mean?
They ain't gonna do
Exactly.
that anyway.
Well, that's what I mean. What does that mean?
You shouldn't have done that.
It's not like they're saying.
Have a nice day.
It's not like they're saying, well, you're out of the UN.
Exactly.
You're out. Of course not. We're not going to do that. Okay. But so I want to transition now to a specific point of free speech, and that's blasphemy. Right. So are there countries in the world? First of all, let me backtrack. Does the U.S. have blasphemy laws today?
No, not really.
As far as I know, we don't. I can say anything I want about any religion, right? I can say the Jehovah's Witnesses are weird, or I hate Mormons, and I don't for the record. I'm just saying, right here, okay? Or Catholics are smelly, or I hate Jews, or whatever. Right? I can say that. There's no blasphemy laws, as far as I know. We might find out later if I get arrested for what I just said. All right, but worldwide, are there blasphemy laws?
Yes.
Oh yes. So here, I'm going to show you this. So this is from 2012, but as far as I know, this hasn't necessarily changed too much. But again, look at the makeup of these countries, right? What you see is a lot of Muslim-based countries have blasphemy laws. You can't speak out against the prophet. And now, did you guys hear I think it was in Denmark, several years ago, there was a cartoonist that did a picture on Muhammad, right? I think he was killed.
really.
I think he was killed. Oh, no, there was a filmmaker, I think, that was killed for, saying blasphemous things about Muhammad. But a lot of these countries really take this very, very seriously. And now I'm not saying that, so look at Ireland, though. So I want to say, this isn't just Muslim countries. What do you think Ireland's blasphemy laws have anything to do with?
Christianity.
Yeah, so, if you know anything about Irish history, too, especially the fights between the Catholics and the Protestants, right, especially in, the 1970s, there's still a lot of tension. Although I just did read that Ireland voted for their first gay prime minister. And so that's kind of a big deal in a predominantly Catholic. Yeah.
But they have blasphemy laws.
Well, and this is 2012, so I don't know if maybe by then. Well, blasphemy doesn't mean being gay is not blasphemous. It's just you can't speak out against, you can't speak negatively of that predominant religion, right? So you also see that there's some what's the word I'm looking for? European countries as well that have, and it just depends too. They could be pretty light laws, and they could be to where we'll stone you, right? Like it just depends on the specific country and like how serious their blasphemy laws are. But this is something that is an issue worldwide. Like when it comes to free speech, like I can't go to Morocco and say what I want about I can't go to Algeria and draw a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, right? Because and on one hand, you have to look at that as a respect for their laws, right? Like just because I'm from a Western country that thinks this is ridiculous, to them that's a part of their culture, right? So it's also kind of a cultural sensitivity idea, right? Okay, now I want to bring up something about Egypt. So kind of about blasphemy, but not really. So in the U.S., like I've said before, it's kind of a national pastime. You get to make fun of your leaders, right? You can make fun of them. It is what it is. Well, you can't cross the line and threaten them, right? So obviously you can't say I'm going to kill blah, blah, blah. But you can say I don't like this president, or they're ugly, or their hair is stupid, or I hate them, or whatever, right? But if you're in other countries, you can't really say that. And so I'm going to use Egypt as an example. So I'm going to play you guys a clip from The Daily Show back when it was still Jon Stewart. And he's talking about a guy named Bassem Youssef. And Bassem Youssef is kind of the Jon Stewart of Egypt. He does like a political satire type show. And see what happens when he speaks out against the president of Egypt. Okay. I don't think
April 1st, 2013.
I don't think we're watching the whole clip.
From Comedy Central's World News
We'll see.
headquarters in New York, this is The Daily Show with Jon Stewart.
We got a good one for you tonight. My guest tonight, very funny author Mary Roach is going to be joining us. But first, I want to talk to you about spring. It's finally here. First Robin, the Easter Bunny, delivering to children the unholy tinted spawn of a chicken and its chocolate bar lover. The Mat's undefeated in first place. But enough about our spring. Enough about our spring. How goes the Arab Spring?
And we all know about
The flourishing of
that.
democracy in the Middle East, countries formerly run by dictatorship that the U.S. mostly supported. Hey, just out of curiosity, how are things going today in, Egypt?
The economy in Egypt, what a mess. Unemployment at 13%. Inflation's almost doubled since November.
Cairo's aging infrastructure goes untended.
Since the revolution, we've seen tourism drop annually about $4 billion.
The huge spike in sexual assaults against women.
Okay, I'm gonna put you down for work in progress. Wow. I gotta tell you, it sounds like this new Egyptian president, Mohamed Morsi's got his hands full. I can't wait to see how he tackles these complex and urgent issues.
Egypt's public prosecutor has ordered the arrest of popular television presenter Bassem Youssef.
Oh, good! Who's that guy? I bet he's a terror. What's he been sabotaging Egypt's infrastructure? Or harassing Egyptian women on the streets? Or unemploying Egyptian people? What's he do?
Bassem Youssef hosts a TV show known for poking fun at the president.
Wait a minute. Our Bassem Youssef? The comedian who hosts the incredibly popular weekly political satire show, Al Burnham? Now, I know Bassem pretty well. So you can imagine that I was shocked that this whole time I have been consorting with a criminal. What did he do? I'm ready.
The country's top prosecutor issued an arrest warrant charging the comedian with insulting both the president and Islam.
That's illegal? Seriously, that's illegal in Egypt? Because if insulting the president and Islam were a jailable offense here, Fox News go bye-bye. Yeah, they go bye-bye. But they don't go bye-bye. But I guess the rules on freedom of expression are a little different in Egypt. Obviously over there, you cannot sow hatred or insult religion. I'm just curious, what would something like insulting religion sound like anyway? Oh, that's insulting, all right. I mean, wow, I'm sure that when President Morsi hears about that, he is going to be so angry. I'm sorry, that is President Morsi? Really? He didn't by any chance precede those remarks with, Here's the sort of thing you really shouldn't say in Egypt, did he? No? By the way, if you are gonna nurse your children on Zionist and Jew hatred, you really gotta breastfeed. I mean, it's the only way to ensure that your kid gets all the anti-Semitic nutrients that he needs. I mean, I guess in a pinch you could buy Gerber's Elders of Zion formula, but it's a lesser product.
I know.
Now, you know what? That was probably a one-time thing for Morsi. We all lose our heads occasionally and insult religion. Even in Egypt, just once, right? Once?
مع الصهاينة مصاصي الدماء مشعل الحروب أحفاد القردة والخنازير.
Okay, two things. On the descended from apes front, I've got some bad news for you. It turns out it's more common than you might think. And as for the pig thing, come on! You're gonna insult the Jews, you can't go with a kosher animal, your goats? So clearly President Morsi knows his way around a good religious insult. Is there anything else Bassem may have done here, perhaps concerning the president himself?
The show mocked him when he was awarded an honorary degree in Pakistan and also took aim at the president's less than fluent English.
Making fun of the president's hats and less than fluent English, that was my entire career for 8 years. Do you have any idea? That's all I did. And I'm sorry, you should hear what we say about the president we supposedly like, Barack. You smoke so much, your lungs are the only authentically black things about you. Kind of reminds me, actually, of his campaign slogan, yes, we can. But should we? You know, Barry from the block. Have we been fooled by the Baracks that you got? All that power that you didn't like when someone else had it, you decided to keep it. Oh my God, you're Frodo. You're Frodo! I don't get this, man. You're the president of Egypt, the inheritor of one of the greatest lands and people in recorded history. Your people invented civilization. The ancient Greeks went to Egypt and were like, what do you got there, geometry and mythology? You gonna finish those? Could we use those? The Egyptians invented written language and paper, toothpaste. People being buried with their cats, that was you! A style of walking people sing about even today. Egypt built the Great Pyramids. Maybe you could get some of the folks who built those to work on getting you a thicker skin. Well, not the same people. Obviously, I can't handle 2 Passovers. I can't handle it. So Bassem Youssef pokes fun of your hat and your lack of promised democratic reforms. What are you worried about? You're the president of Egypt. You have an army. He's got puns and a show. You have tanks and planes. We should know you still have the receipts. Look. Silencing a comedian doesn't qualify you to be president of Egypt. Just president of NBC. I gotta tell you something. Talk about a once proud empire. Whatever problems you have in Egypt, at least you didn't greenlight Smash. Look, when you're... Sorry. A couple of bloggers just went nuts. When you are actually powerful, you don't have to be petty. I know, I'm petty all the time. And the truth is, look, come here, let me talk to you. Booby. What are you worried about, Mr. President? The power of satire to overthrow the status quo? I've been doing this crap fest for 15 years. Granted, I'm not as popular as Bassem, but we've had our nights. And just so you know, there's been a grand total of 0 toppled governments we brought about during that time. We couldn't stop the Iraq War, we tried. I couldn't even get Jim Cramer off the air. Jim Cramer, it's a money show where Sound effects give you stock investment advice. It's but come on. Charging Bassem Youssef with insulting Egypt and Islam? I know Bassem. Bassem is my friend, my brother. There are two things he loves in this world with all his heart: Egypt and Islam, and his family. The three things. There's three, and what is that flatbread with the cheese? It's tart. It's like a white. It's not baba ganoush. It's like there's four things that he loves. My point is, Bassem Youssef loves Egypt so much he chooses to live there, even though some crazy guy is threatening to arrest him. Oh, right. But by the way, without Bassem and all those journalists and bloggers and brave protesters who took to Tahrir Square to voice dissent, you, President Morsi, would not be in a position to repress them. For someone who spent time in jail yourself.
That's an excellent point, based off what we know about the Arab Spring, right?
For someone who spent time in jail yourself under Mubarak, you seem awfully eager to send other people there for the same non-crimes. And just like you, they will only emerge from prison stronger and more determined. So, all sending comedians and bloggers to prison accomplishes is lowering the quality of prison yard athletics. Obviously, look, you don't have to take democracy advice from a pig man like myself.
He's Jewish, in case
But
you don't
perhaps
know.
you'll listen to this brave Egyptian revolutionary.
Whoever criticizes me has the full right to do so. I welcome any criticism. I welcome every opinion. I welcome every view.
Bassem Youssef, Amr Moussa, Mohammed al-Baradei, they don't have to worry about going to jail.
They are Egyptians. They are part of my family from Egypt. There is no way that any harm can befall them because of their opinions or their personal opposition.
Now that's the kind of open democratic spirit that a great nation like Egypt deserves. Because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The world is watching. No one wants to see Egypt plunge into darkness. Democracy isn't a democracy if it only lasts up until someone makes fun of your hat. Guess what? We'll be right back.
So I think the reason I show that, I think it's obvious. That really does demonstrate these differences, right, in free speech laws. Like, this guy is going to get in trouble for making fun of a hat, right? So I think it really showcases, you know, kind of backs up this chart we just looked at, right, with freedom of the press throughout the world. Okay, now, when you think about religion, specifically in free speech, do you guys think that in the United States, that under free speech laws, criticizing religions should be, oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I know. I'm going to turn it back on in just a minute. So do you think that free speech laws should protect the criticism of religion, or also religions criticizing the U.S. government, military? What do you guys think? In the U.S.? Freedom of speech. Okay, now, are there ideas, though, that we all kind of disagree with, but we all kind of unite behind that we hate, but they're also protected by free speech? And what I mean by that is we're going to watch this clip about the Westboro Baptist
But that hasn't stopped us from arguing
So,
about
I
it.
know. We all can agree that these
Some
people...
of the arguments have been bitter, and the issues.
But there was a
painful.
Supreme Court
But
case
those
about them.
arguments have sometimes led to the most important assertions of our rights. These people are members of the Westboro Baptist Church. It's a small fringe religious group from
One thing I forgot to say, this is from a series called Constitution USA, and this is the episode where they talk about the Bill of Rights. So just, I forgot to kind of preface that.
Topeka, Kansas. They call this free speech, but anybody's faith in the freedom to speak one's mind will be tested when they hear these guys. For the past decade, the Westboro Baptists have staged their protests at the funerals of American military personnel killed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Were you guys aware of that?
They don't claim that the fallen soldiers themselves are gay. They believe the deaths of our servicemen and women are divine punishment for America's tolerance of homosexuality, and they are not polite about it.
I pray to the dear Lord to please kill more of those guys.
He's dead now.
They don't seem to have gotten the message.
In March 2006, in Westminster, Maryland, The Westboro Baptists picketed at the funeral of Marine Lance Corporal Matthew Snyder, who had just been killed in Iraq. Corporal Snyder's father, Albert Snyder, sued Westboro for defamation of character and for inflicting emotional distress on him and his grieving family. The case reached the Supreme Court, where in an 8-1 vote, the justices ruled in favor of the Westboro Baptists.
Although it didn't have the outcome that I wanted, hey, I fought the good fight. Thank you.
This shot is the one probably I'm most proud of because he loved kids. This was taken about a week before he was killed. He used to send me letters, and that's how he would address them. He would just address them Dad.
Right. You were there for the arguments in the Supreme Court?
Yes.
That was an 8-1 decision. Tell me why they're wrong.
I think everybody deserves to be buried in peace.
Right.
I don't care who you are. What about my rights to privacy? What about my rights, to mourn and grieve in my way?
Right.
My son died for the Constitution, but I can't believe that our forefathers meant something like this to be free speech.
What I'm thinking of is where to draw the line, because obviously you'd agree that if I express an opinion about anything, it could hurt someone.
I don't see it as a line, but I see it as a case-by-case situation.
Yeah.
You have to use common sense. I mean, if we can do or say anything to anyone, anywhere, anytime, what kind of civilization are we going to be living in?
Are we making our freedom of speech subjective if we allow the level of hurt experienced by another person to determine your rights to speak?
You come back and you tell me that when it happens to your child.
Okay. I hope I never have to do that.
I hope you don't. I hope nobody has to do it.
Well, you'll see, because what's going to happen is state and local municipalities will start passing their own laws, saying they have to be X amount away from.
I feel like they could have been trespassed instantly. That way, this could have been.
Right. I don't think it was private property, because I think that would be a different ballgame. That's a good question.
In our country, there's always been tension between an abstract right to free speech and how much we hate what somebody is actually saying.
Susan Fluke says that she must be paid to have sex. What does that make her? It makes her a slut, right?
Our country's tolerance for unpopular ideas has been tested over and over. During World War I, Americans were swept up in a patriotic fervor, and Congress made it a crime to interfere with the war effort and banned disloyal language about the government, the flag, or the armed forces. When the Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs spoke out against the draft, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Oh, 10 years, that's why.
In the 1950s, people like Senator Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin stirred up a Red Scare. And when communists spoke their political views out loud, they risked being arrested or deported. But things were slowly changing. More Americans began to recognize that freedom was a big part of what made us different from our totalitarian enemies. And in case after case, the Supreme Court upheld the right to free speech, even if most people considered that speech to be offensive. The Ku Klux Klan was allowed to express its racist views. American Nazis won the right to march through a mostly Jewish neighborhood. And American flags could even be burned as an act of political protest. In case after case, the Supreme Court upheld the freedom of all Americans to speak their mind, even if their views are controversial. And it supported the freedom of the press to publish almost anything, even if the government doesn't like it. Given this trend, the ruling in favor of the Westboro Baptists should come as no surprise. As Justice Brandeis wrote way back in the 1920s, when we're confronted with speech we don't agree with, the remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence. It seems like the courts are more and more willing to give freedom the benefit of the doubt and treat our First Amendment guarantees literally. Eugene Volokh is a law professor who exercises that right on a daily basis on his popular blog called The Volokh Conspiracy.
So this is America, and I have an absolute right to free speech, right?
You have a right to free speech that's quite broad.
Quite broad, but not
Lots
absolute.
of things you can say, bunch of things you can't.
I want to try to make this concrete. That's a theater, it's a big theater, and let's imagine that it was filled with people. Now I know I can't run in the middle of a performance and yell, fire. That's not protected.
Falsely shouting fire is
Right.
not protected. If there really is a fire, you can tell them it's a fire.
How about if I run in and yell, this movie sucks?
First Amendment protects opinion, and yet when the government is trying to restrict speech because of what you're saying, because it doesn't like the message, that's when the protections most kick in.
Well, are there places you think in our current understanding where we've gone too far? For example, the Supreme Court has recently said that money is, in effect, speech. Do you agree with that?
What the Supreme Court said is restricting people's ability to spend money in order to speak is a restriction on speech.
Right.
Whether you're an individual, or whether you're a newspaper, or whether you are a corporation, or whether you're a trade union, that is a restriction on the ability to speak. And on that, I think the Supreme Court is quite correct.
Now, you were born in the Soviet Union, and one of the interesting things we found out is that the Soviet Union had a Bill of Rights, which everybody ignored. Here in America, it works. More or less, but man, it works. Why?
Throughout American history, there's been a combination of a culture that cares about liberty and democracy, and a structure that is conducive to liberty and democracy. The provisions for democracy and for elections in the Constitution wouldn't mean much if you weren't free to argue. Democracy is hard to have happen without freedom of speech.
So that's democracy in action. When the Supreme Court upheld the free speech rights of the Westboro Baptists, they were protecting speech almost no one could agree with. But the justices also said that the privacy of a grieving family could be protected. Local and state governments could make rules limiting how close protesters could get to a military funeral and when they could show up.
And have you guys heard too
In
that
August
like I think it's the Hells Angels or like biker groups?
It's not the health.
No, but it's like,
But there is
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll go and they'll like create a barrier. So, you know, private citizens also can have a say, right, in something like this.
Are you talking about BACA, the Bikers Against Child Abuse?
No, but they also do something like that where they protect the victims. But there's a biker group that'll go to funerals of dead military members and create kind of like a partition. So if protesters come, the families don't really have to see them, and they're just create a barrier.
2012, Congress passed a federal bill to apply similar rules to all military funerals.
We defend our Constitution and the First Amendment and free speech, but we also believe that when men and women die in the service of their country and are laid to rest, it should be done with the utmost honor and respect.
About a month ago, I got a letter from President Obama telling me that he was thinking about me when he signed the bill.
Since your case, and probably because of your case, the Westboro Baptists, they are now, I think I can say, among the most hated and reviled people in the country. But now, when they show up, there are counter-protesters, there are phalanxes of motorcycle guys, and veterans and soldiers to shield the mourners from these people.
Correct.
Then in that case, can you argue that you won?
I did win. I did win.
It seems to me, hearing you tell these stories, that a great evil was done to you, but an even greater good came out of it and was called forth for you on behalf of you and your son.
This was the last fight for Matt.
I have a student whose dad died in Fallujah, and that was like in '04. This is kind of back when Westboro Baptist really started to do this, and his dad's funeral was protested by Westboro Baptist. So it really does, you know, it really hurts a lot of people. But that it comes back to that free speech, as the Supreme Court said, they have a right to do that. But again, state and local municipalities and local organizations also have a right to come into those protests as well and create human shields and pass laws that say protesters have to be X amount of feet away. And so that's kind of like, I like the point that he brought up, and in a way he did win, right? He brought this to the forefront of the American people by bringing it to the Supreme Court. And in that case, I think we can all agree, regardless of your political leanings, I don't know one person in my life that's ever agreed with the Westboro Baptist Church, right? Like, they're a very small fringe group. Exactly. Well, the Fred Phelps died, the guy that ran it, and then his daughter, I guess, defected. She came out and was like, you know, this was wrong. You know, yeah. But I don't know if she waited till after her dad was dead, and if she did, that's kind of like, not that great. Okay, so there's two more things I want to discuss over the next 9 minutes. So obviously, the U.S. has this long storied history with free speech, and while yes, there are moments in history that free speech gets taken away, when you compare us to a country like Egypt, right, we obviously have a lot more free speech than other countries. Now, as the U.S. and as our position in the world, should we use our specific history and our influence to try to get other countries to have free speech laws as well? What do you guys think?
Well, you can't force it on other countries.
Exactly, right? And I think we've learned that lesson many times throughout our history, right? Especially like the current Middle East stuff, right? That's what I was hoping you guys would say. While it would be nice for the people living in those countries, the fact of the matter is they want more free speech. That's something those citizens of those countries have to do on their own.
It's like we have democracy, but we've had it so long and we still don't have it right.
Right, exactly. And no, it's never going to be perfect. No, never.
So how can you just give it to them and expect it to be like us?
Because it doesn't work.
No, it
does not work.
Like this.
That does not work at all. Okay, and then a couple other things. One other thing I always like to leave the class on when I do this free speech lecture is this. What are your thoughts on this? This is a comic. His name is Patton Oswalt. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. Thoughts? This is our final moment of class. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with this?
Yes.
I do too. I have to respect, I don't have to respect it. I have to say, you believe, okay, you're Westboro Baptist. I think you're a piece of shit for believing what you believe. You can believe it, but I think that it's stupid.
Yeah,
I think that is kind of the cornerstone of what, as an American, we really should kind of look at other belief systems as, right? I don't agree with it. I think it's dumb. But you can have it, right? And I can't, I'm not going to be violent towards you over it. I'm not going to, do anything in retaliation. I'm just going to recognize you have a different belief system than me, and I'm going to move on with my day, right?
What if, the way they are, it incites violence.
It does.
I mean, it incites some serious violence.
And that's all through human history, not just in America, right? Especially when you apply this to religion.
That's going too far.
What do you mean? This?
No, the Baptist Church. That's going
Well, I agree.
That's going too
And it should, I don't know why it wasn't covered under that original Supreme Court with the fighting words doctrine, right?
Yeah.
That must have gotten overturned at some point, or maybe overturned within that Supreme Court decision. Because that wasn't that's inciting. They want people to come up to them and confront them at these protests. That's what they want. Right? So they can say, hey, this is my right to protest, which it is your right to protest. But I'm not sure of the legality behind that. But I kind of keep this in mind when religious people come to my door. I think that's the utmost of rude behavior, coming to my door to talk to me about religion, but I'm not rude to those people. I'm just I'm not interested, and I shut the door. Because again, I kind of go by this, I don't care what you believe. Just leave me alone. I'm at home in my pajamas,
It's not it's not like we have full complete, we can say whatever we want because it doesn't protect harassment or cyberbullying and stuff like that. Because it's actually, I think it's illegal to cyberbully somebody here in Arizona.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that but then what's cyberbullying?
Harassing.
Just saying mean things to someone online?
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Harassing them.
Well, see, the internet brings up a big new dimension of free speech, right? Because in that video, if you watched it till the end, they talk about how things platforms like Twitter, right? Your rights to privacy. So for example, if I put all of my personal information on my Facebook or my Twitter, right? Not personal information in the sense of my address, but where I work and my personal beliefs and things like that, do I have a right to privacy anymore?
Well, you put it out there.
You put it out there, right? So if you put that information willingly onto your social media profiles or on an internet platform somewhere, the argument now is that, you've lost your rights to privacy because you put that information on it. And that's what I always tell my stepdaughter, she's interested in politics, and I'm like, well, you have to be very careful about what you put online then. You have to be careful what you what you click on. Because all that stuff is public record, right? And so if you ever run for politics one day, I guarantee guarantee you they will be scrolling through your social media. Employers scroll through your social media.
I had a friend of mine when I was in college back in 87, 89, and he wanted to be president. And I was like, oh, let's go out. Nope, I can't. He was planning when he was 18 to be president. And, you know, I was like, oh, let's go out, you know, let's do this, let's do that. Nope, I can't do that. You know, he was planning that far ahead. Unfortunately, he was a diabetic, and he had several kidney transplants, and his health just eventually took his life.
You should have done all the partying then.
In the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So he never got the chance. But
well, that's one thing that, like, well, I'm just so grateful there was no social media when I was in high school. Just put that out there. But, you know, I look at this younger generation, while I think that social media has a lot of really good positives, like in the way it connects people, there's also kind of a dark spot, right? That you have to be really, really careful about what you're putting on, because you're giving up your rights to privacy by doing that. And so I don't think that's quite something that they've grasped at this age, because I don't think you know, when you're in high school, you don't necessarily think like, okay, you know, when I'm 25, I want to do this. When I'm 30, I want to do this, and your employers are going to be Googling you.
Well, it's two things. One, once you put it out there, it's out there.
Yeah. Even if you delete it.
Yeah,
it's still there, right? It's like cached or whatever you call it.
Another thing is, when my daughters were teenagers, they were like, you can't come in my room, it's my private thing. I said, this is my private house. I come in your room if I want. I take the door off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because if you're an adolescent and you live in your parents' home, you have
no right. Yeah. Oh, my mom told me that all the time. You have no rights to privacy in my house.
I used to argue with my dad. We live in a democracy, not this.
Not this house. It's a dictatorship.
That's right. Yep.
So, you know, just free speech is obviously an important part of our culture, and something that I think we should all recognize that needs to be protected, right? But recognize that in the future, at some point, it'll be taken away again, you know, at some point for a war or whatever, you know, federal government level thinks that it should be taken away. And so, again, it kind of goes back to this, you know, universal human rights document. Just because we've got a Bill of Rights we can put around us like a comfy blanket doesn't necessarily mean that there's not holes in that blanket, right? So.
I set the blanket on fire.
Exactly. Okay, so on Wednesday, when we come back to class, we're going to talk about U.S. global engagement, and that ties in really well with the Middle East and kind of like our role in the world police, etc. So that's what we're going to focus on Wednesday, and then the week after we'll do Brexit and Europe, and then we'll do Cuba and U.S. relations, and then grab bags. So I'll put an announcement up today, and you guys can reply to the announcement and let me know what you want to see on the last day class. Okay. Any questions? You guys good? Yep. All right, go out there and say something offensive. Yeah. Guys, have a good day. I'll see you on Wednesday.